Close the door, Brad said, not looking up from his phone. I knew from the second I stepped into that off-brand beige conference room, with its stained carpet tiles and the faint smell of someone's microwaved salmon lunch, that something was off. Maybe it was the empty chair next to him, the one usually reserved for HR during these performance reviews. Maybe it was the way he was grinning like he just won a free round of golf instead of prepping to evaluate the person who'd single-handedly kept Nerveware's backend from collapsing into a pile of flaming JavaScript spaghetti. He started flipping open a manila folder like he was unveiling my obituary. Your work's fine. Fine. He even gave a dismissive little shrug, as if fine was a generous assessment. This was the same company that couldn't run payroll on time until I patched their janky legacy system at 2 a.m. from my bathroom floor, battling food poisoning and a heating pad on my spine. I'd single-handedly wrestled a critical database migration to the ground during a holiday weekend, while Brad was probably sipping mimosas somewhere. And now fine. Brad leaned back, arms behind his head like he was auditioning to be the new face of corporate mediocrity. But let's be honest, Olivia, you're more of a code monkey than anything else. I blinked. Excuse me. The words hung in the air, thick with condescension. You know, head down, keyboard clacking. Great at writing code, not so much at strategic thinking. He waved a hand vaguely, as if dispelling a minor nuisance. Oh, that's how this was going to go. He smiled, the kind of smile that usually comes before someone tells you your dog died, except this time the dead thing was my faith in corporate loyalty. So we're passing on the raise this year. Budget's tight, and frankly, we need people who think bigger. That's when something in me stopped. Not like a snap, more like the click of a lock turning, cold, clean, final. A quiet, terrifying clarity descended. This wasn't just about a raise. This was about their perception of me, their deliberate blindness to my contributions, and their casual disrespect. And in that moment, the anger that had been simmering for years solidified into something far more dangerous, a plan. I kept my face still, even though inside my blood was boiling like overclocked CPU cores in a summer server room. I wanted to ask if Brad even knew what I did day to day. Did he understand the difference between a load balancer and a light switch? Did he know how many sleepless nights I'd spent debugging critical errors while he was dreaming of his next golf handicap? But I already knew the answer. He probably thought Git was short for get out here with your details, nerd. Strategy? I built the entire infrastructure they strategized on. I see, I said finally, my voice flat, hands folded in my lap like a good little monkey. He nodded, mistaking composure for compliance. I guess that's the problem with people like Brad. They think silence means submission. What he didn't know was that every inch of the Nerveware backend, every API call, every authentication node, every scheduled job and microservice, ran through code I personally licensed to them. A license that, as of the paperwork I made sure legal rubber-stamped 3 years ago, expired automatically upon termination of my contract. A little clause I had highlighted, printed, and emailed to myself with a subject line that now felt like divine foreshadowing, in case of corporate demassery. Brad slid a single sheet of paper across the table. We'd love to see you stick around, though. You're reliable. You can help train the new hires, of course. Reliable like a toaster or a seatbelt. Just something that works until it doesn't, and then you throw it out. I stood, grabbed the paper, and nodded. Thanks, Brad. I'll give it some thought. I walked out of that room with my heart pounding and my eyes dry. There wasn't going to be a scene. No slamming doors or tearful speeches about respect. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me flinch. But as I returned to my desk, my kingdom of quietly humming Docker containers and terminal windows whispering secrets, I felt a calm settle in. Not peace, not yet, but the slow glacial shift of tectonic plates beneath a fault line. Because what they didn't realize is that I'd been preparing for this day for years. The genesis of a grand design. It started years ago, in a bustling Starbucks off I-75, the kind where the Wi-Fi drops every time someone microwaves a panini. Nerveware was still just 3 guys with startup breath and a Google Slides pitch deck. They couldn't afford a proper dev team, so they pitched me equity and the promise of making something disruptive. Disruptive, in this case, meant they couldn't afford to pay me until series of funding, and needed someone stupid or desperate enough to build their entire back-end infrastructure solo. I was both. So I said yes. And I built it. Nights, weekends, lunch breaks with cold pizza and a second monitor jammed between a toaster and a cat tree. While other people were out living, I was setting up scalable load balancers and dependency injection systems like a one-woman dev army. I poured my expertise, my sanity, and every ounce of my problem-solving ability into that system. No one reviewed my code, no one offered to help. But they sure as hell bragged about it in investor calls. I remember hearing the CEO describe our world-class proprietary infrastructure like he'd hand-coded it from mountaintop scrolls, while I was still debugging race conditions with one eye and babysitting a Jenkins pipeline with the other. They gave me a handshake, some equity promises printed on vapor, and a vague email chain approving me to build everything through my own LLC for liability reasons, they said. I smiled and nodded. Fine, I'll be the contractor. But the contract? Oh, I wrote that thing like a prenup from hell. Clause 14b, license to use core backend infrastructure non-transferable, expires upon voluntary or involuntary termination of agreement. Buried deep in legalese, signed by all three co-founders. And because I knew the universe loves irony, I highlighted it in yellow, screenshotted it, printed a hard copy, and emailed it to myself, subject line, for when they forget who built this house. The betrayal wasn't loud, it was slow drip by drip. They stopped inviting me to product meetings, stopped asking what the system could do, and started dictating what it must do. Features stacked like Jenga blocks. Just a quick update, turned into full architecture shifts on 2-day deadlines. And when things worked, Brad took the credit. When they didn't, guess whose inbox got lit up at 3 a.m. with urgent, bug please fix. Somewhere along the way, I realized I wasn't an employee, I was duct tape. The unglamorous, overused, unappreciated miracle holding everything together until the second they thought they could replace me with something flashier. So I planned. I automated license checks, setting up authentication against a private server I owned, a single heartbeat ping per day to validate backend access. Silent. Invisible. And when that heartbeat stopped, the system would lock like a bank vault. I documented everything, in my own words, in my own tools. Not out of paranoia, but pattern recognition. I'd seen this movie before, Girl Builds Kingdom. Kingdom forgets girl. Kingdom falls. They thought they owned the castle. I just rented it to them, month to month, with a very clear eviction clause. The calm before the storm. So when Brad dropped that code monkey line like he was reading off a meme he barely understood, I didn't snap because I was hurt. I didn't even flinch because I was mad. I flinched because I knew they were already dead. They just didn't know it yet. I turned in my resignation like I was handing over a library book. Clean, quiet, overdue in all the right ways. 2 weeks' notice. Gracious tone. Not a single passive-aggressive syllable. My subject line simply read transition plan, dated exactly 13 days before my license's expiration clause hit. Not 14, not 12, 13. This was crucial. It meant the last full day of my employment would land the day before the backend's heartbeat check failed. The system would keep breathing until midnight of that day, then it would flatline. I waited for the explosion. Instead, I got Brad. He skimmed the email on his phone, mid-bagel bite, cream cheese stuck in his beard like he'd been licking a fax machine. Alright, well, we'll start posting your role ASAP. Should be easy to get someone offshore. Half the cost, right? I nodded, keeping my face neutral while my brain made a short list titled Reasons Brad Will Cry in Q4. One of the interns, a sweet kid named Marcus, peeked over the cubicle an hour later and whispered, "Is it true you're leaving?" I nodded again, and he looked like someone had told him Santa got laid off. But who's going to fix the Jenkins pipeline? Who knows the cron job schedules? Who understands the fallback routing schema? I smiled. Apparently, someone offshore. Half the cost. Marcus looked utterly devastated, and a tiny part of me felt a pang of guilt. He was a good kid, caught in the crossfire. I walked back to my desk like a ghost attending her own funeral. Didn't touch a line of code, just opened up my monitoring dashboard, ran the final diagnostics, and downloaded everything: server logs, API request histories, load balancer reports, token refresh rates, hell, even a snapshot of the AWS billing spikes during our last product launch. Not because I needed them, just receipts. I wanted proof of the kingdom I built before they tried to tell people it was made of straw and monkey paws. I saved it all on an encrypted drive labeled peach cobbler recipes, because Brad once asked if YAML was some kind of vegan spread, and I didn't trust him not to go snooping in a petty panic. The office buzzed with Monday apathy. No fanfare, no balloon drop, not even a stolen sticky note off my monitor. That's what hurt the most, weirdly. Not the insult, not the raised denial, not even the offshore jab, but how little it seemed to matter that I was leaving after years of keeping the entire operation running on spit, caffeine, and code witchery. I could have walked out that door with my laptop flaming like a Viking funeral, and no one would have blinked. Good. Because when the lights went out, I wanted them to be confused. I wanted the confusion to ferment into dread. I wanted them to look around and ask themselves, wait, who used to handle this? And then remember. Remember the woman they called a code monkey when they thought she was just another cog in their dusty machine. The one who left with a smile, a clean resignation letter, and a heartbeat server ticking like a doomsday clock taped behind a wall no one thought to check. They had 13 days. I had all the time in the world. The descent into chaos. They brought in a team from somewhere that looked good on a PowerPoint. 5 devs in matching company-issued polos, smiling like they were about to fix the plumbing instead of entering a digital minefield laced with traps only I understood. Management beamed like proud parents. Brad even clapped a hand on one of their shoulders and said, "This is the dream team, folks. Time to modernize our stack." They didn't even know which language half the stack was. First day, they tried to log into the back-end dashboard, got a credential mismatch error. Tried again. Locked out. They flagged it. IT flagged ops. Ops flagged legal. Legal flagged me. Except I wasn't there anymore. I was on my back porch, drinking iced coffee and watching squirrels fight over a Dorito, the big one, just like I planned. By day 3, they attempted a full migration. No rollback protocol. No dry run. Just balls out chaos. They spun up a new environment, tried to mirror the back-end code from the repo, only to realize the repo hadn't been touched in months because the live code was continuously deployed from a private server, my private server. The validation ping fired off at midnight. It went out like usual, but this time it came back with a 403, license expired. And with that, the heartbeat stopped. Services began failing like dominoes with vertigo. First, the client dashboards went down, then the analytics suite, and the authentication API. Suddenly, users couldn't log in, admins couldn't access records, and error logs were generating so fast they looked like slot machines having strokes. They tried restarting containers. No dice. They checked system status, all green, except the part that mattered, the license verification endpoint, which was now returning exactly one word in the response body by. Marcus the intern, now awkwardly titled temporary sysadmin, raised his hand during the morning stand-up, his face etched with worry. Hey. I think the system was tied to an external license server, and it's rejecting all attempts to connect since Olivia left. Brad waved him off, a dismissive flick of the wrist. It's probably just a DNS caching issue. Clear it and move on. Marcus tried again, more forcefully this time. Pretty sure it's not that, Marcus. Please let the professionals work. Professionals were busy trying to Docker compose a sandbox environment using a README I wrote in 2019 that explicitly stated in bold, "This is a temporary dev environment. Use for staging at your own risk. Seriously, Brad, don't touch this." By Friday, 3 of the new hires had quietly removed nerveware from their LinkedIn profiles. One guy in QA started sending his resume from a personal email titled, urgentcareertransition@gmail.com. I watched it all from afar, like someone watching their ex try to assemble IKEA furniture without instructions. Sure, you feel a pang of guilt, until you remember how that ex told you flat pack assembly was a man's job. I didn't laugh, not out loud. I did take a screenshot of the public status page when it started showing intermittent service across all systems, with a timestamp that matched the exact moment my license died. I printed it and slid it into a folder labeled Closure. The clock struck midnight like a courtroom gavel. Somewhere in the vast and indifferent cloud, my license validation server reached out, just like it had every night for the last 987 days, and quietly asked the question, "Is this contract still valid?" This time, for the first time, it got a single cold answer, no. No fireworks, no alarms, just a silent flick of the switch. Services still ran for a few minutes, like a decapitated chicken flapping on muscle memory. Then the collapses began. At 12:04 a.m., the load balancer stopped routing requests to the authentication service. At 12:07, user dashboards failed to load. By 12:11, every client-facing portal timed out with a 504. By 12:18, the support ticket system, also back-end dependent, choked and died. The next morning, the office awoke to the smell of smoldering systems and the collective screech of 100 client inboxes exploding like airbags. Every ping from Zendesk, every missed cron job, every failed login attempt was a drop in the storm that Nerveware was completely, irrevocably unprepared to weather. "Hey Brad, the portal's down." No response. "Brad? Nothing." That's because Brad, in all his khaki-clad glory, decided to take the day off to mentally reset after navigating the challenges of team transitions. Translation: he left a 5-person offshore dev team and one terrified intern holding a bag full of snakes. Meanwhile, the newly hired CTO, some buzzword enthusiast named Laurel, was standing in front of a whiteboard, scribbling root cause analysis, like it was going to resurrect the servers. "I think the main issue is a missing environment variable," she offered, sipping from a mug that said #girlboss in Comic Sans. Marcus, now wearing the hollow stare of someone who's witnessed war crimes and log files, whispered, "It's not a variable. It's a license. The codebase isn't technically owned by us. It was leased, and the lease expired." Laurel blinked, her carefully constructed composure cracking. "Who leases back-end architecture?" "Apparently we do." At 9:30 a.m., the first investor email arrived with the subject line, "Urgent Platform Outage." By 10:12, a major client threatened to terminate their contract if access wasn't restored by end of day. At 11 o'clock sharp, an emergency Zoom call lit up the executive calendar. Half the company joined from their phones because the internal network was too fried to sustain video. Brad finally appeared in the group chat with a message that read, "Someone call Olivia." They didn't even know what they were asking for, not really. But I did. Because while they were tripping over themselves spinning disaster into deliverables, I was sitting on my couch in sweatpants, sipping a double-shot espresso out of a chipped mug that said, "World's Okayest Developer." I'd already seen the LinkedIn notifications, 3 recruiters, 2 competitors, 1 ex-colleague from 5 years ago who messaged, "Hey, I heard about the Nerveware thing, you interested in some freelance work?" I didn't respond. Not yet. Instead, I opened up my private system monitor, watched the red bars dance like devil's teeth across the screen, and leaned back with a quiet, measured breath. It wasn't revenge. It was math. Simple. I built the thing. I own the thing. They let me walk. And now the thing was gone. The 1 p.m. all-hands call wasn't a meeting, it was a funeral. 62 faces, most of them frozen on bad webcams, watched the CTO stumble through a presentation titled Backend Restoration Roadmap, should have just read "We're completely screwed." Laurel clicked through a flowchart that looked like a conspiracy wall drawn by a raccoon. "So, as you can see, the authentication services failed due to a cascading timeout in the legacy infrastructure," she said, mispronouncing infrastructure like it had 3 Z's. Marcus unmuted. "That's not what happened." She paused, irritated. "Excuse me." He cleared his throat, his voice gaining a shaky courage. "It's not legacy. It's Olivia's system. And it didn't fail. It was shut off intentionally. The license expired. There's a clause in her contract. I found it." Silence. Long and heavy. Then a VP in a Patagonia vest spoke up, face pale. "Wait. We don't own the back end." Marcus shook his head. "Nope. We rented it from her LLC. And the license was non-transferable, expires upon termination." Somewhere in the office, a junior lawyer let out an audible "oh shit." That's when things went full tilt. Legal started pinging archived email chains. HR tried to deny knowledge of the agreement until someone forwarded the original signed PDF with the clause highlighted, annotated, and approved by a now-retired compliance officer who wrote "looks fine" next to it in Comic Sans. Someone from finance muttered that they might have to restate earnings if the platform's continuity couldn't be guaranteed. A bald man with a Bluetooth earpiece whispered, "This is breached territory," like it was a spell that might ward off litigation. Meanwhile, I was sitting cross-legged on my balcony, watching birds fight over half a donut someone had dropped on the sidewalk. My phone buzzed every 4 minutes. LinkedIn messages piled up like unpaid invoices. One from a recruiter named Jess: saw the Nerveware outage, your name's been coming up. You open to something more stable? CTO slot, base $220,000, options and bonus. Another from my old friend Tina: are you seeing this? Brad just posted some vague taking responsibility and reflecting post on LinkedIn. He turned off comments, LOL. I grinned, took a sip of cold brew that had gone watery but still tasted like victory. Back in the Zoom call, Brad had finally slithered on screen. His hair was disheveled, his voice cracked like drywall under pressure. So, yes, we're reviewing the situation. Legals involved. Hoping to reconnect with Olivia soon to work something out. Someone asked, why didn't we back it up? Brad shrugged, a pathetic gesture. We thought we had ownership. She never said anything. I actually laughed out loud, because I did say something. Many times. They just didn't listen. I had the emails, the annotated contracts, the flagged documents, all of it. They thought silence meant ignorance. What they didn't realize was that I wasn't quiet because I didn't know what I was worth. It was quiet because I knew exactly how much they'd pay when they finally figured it out. And baby, the meter was running. The reckoning. The first call came at 7:42 p.m., an unknown number, Cleveland area code. I let it ring. Then again, 20 minutes later. This time voicemail: hey Olivia, it's Brad. Listen, we've hit a few snags, nothing major, just some hiccups with the back-end stuff. We were wondering if you might be available for, I don't know, just a few hours of help? Quick migration support? Call me. I didn't call. The email followed at 9:13 p.m. Subject: quick assistance. Hi Olivia, we're in a bit of a time-sensitive situation and would appreciate your expertise just to get the team oriented. Happy to compensate for your time, of course. Nothing extensive, just a few pointers. I read it while brushing my teeth. Then the texts started. Brad, Olivia, we really need your help. Clients are furious. This doesn't reflect well on you either, by the way. Brad, not trying to guilt trip, just being real. Brad, we'll make it worth your while. That one made me snort so hard I had to spit toothpaste into the sink. At 10:27 p.m., I replied, hi Brad, I'm currently available on a limited consulting basis. My rate is $475 per hour with an 80-hour minimum. Full upfront payment required to reserve time. I do not work under NDA, non-compete, or any derivative gag clause. Scope of work must be provided in writing before the first session. Please let me know if you'd like an invoice. He didn't respond for 8 hours. At 6:02 a.m. the next morning, I woke up to this: fine. We accept. Please send invoice and terms. Oh, now they were ready to talk. So I did. I sent over a beautifully formatted invoice with a subject line that read, Monkey Business Professional Services Agreement. I made sure to include an itemized breakdown. Line 1, Emergency Technical Consulting, Back-end Restoration Support. Line 2, Strategic Oversight of System Stabilization, because strategy's important, right? Under terms, I included the following conditions. Payment due within 24 hours of invoice receipt. Client waives all prior ownership claims to codebase or documentation. All consulting to be performed remotely on Olivia's schedule. No NDA, no non-competes, no silence. Client agrees to publish a formal correction on LinkedIn clarifying previous code monkey language as inaccurate. That last one? Petty maybe. But when you've been the one keeping the servers alive with spit, coffee, and a dozen duct-taped Lambda functions, you earn a little petty. Didn't even push back. Within hours, payment hit my account in full, $38,000, $475 x 80 hours, prepaid for a job I could finish in 3. Because this was never about time. It was about proof. Proof that they knew now what they hadn't known when Brad was chewing his everything bagel and telling me I was replaceable. They thought they were buying my time. What they really bought was a seat at the feet of the code monkey they never understood was the queen of the jungle. The return. I walked through the glass doors of Nerveware at 10 a.m. sharp, wearing jeans, boots, and a hoodie that said, I void warranties. No badge this time, No awkward smile at reception, just a temporary visitor pass clipped to my pocket like a killstreak medal. The silence when I entered the dev bullpen was delicious. The offshore team stared like I was a ghost from a legend, the one who came before. Marcus looked up from his terminal and whispered, "Oh, thank God." Relief washed over his face, mixed with awe. Laurel, #GirlBossCTO, came power walking out of the conference room with 2 interns flanking her like emotional support animals. "Olivia, thanks for coming. We've, isolated the issue but can't re-establish service continuity. We're hoping you can just stabilize things." She tried to say it with confidence, but the tremble in her voice gave her away. She'd Googled 3 acronyms last night, I bet. 2 of them were mine. "Sure," I said calmly, dropping my laptop bag on the table like a sheriff returning to town for one last showdown. "Point me to the terminal." 3 hours. That's all it took. I authenticated into the validation server, disabled the license check, spun up the original containers, restored database sync points for my private mirror, and recompiled the service endpoints with their original keys only I still had access to. The system breathed like it had been underwater and was finally surfacing. One by one, the services flickered green. Dashboards loaded. Clients logged in. Metrics returned to normal. At 10:07 p.m., after ensuring everything was humming along, I uploaded one single file to the internal knowledge base, a PDF titled Unnecessary Documentation PDF, with 84 pages of perfectly organized, clean, idiot-proof infrastructure notes. The first page had a post-it graphic with my old Slack message printed across it. "Do you want this documented, or are we still pretending this runs on magic?" And then I left. I walked through the office with no fanfare, no thank you, just a nod to Marcus, a wink to the stunned QA guy, and silence from the peanut gallery of middle managers pretending to circle back on air. And then I saw him. Brad. He was by the elevator, holding a cup of burned breakroom coffee, wearing a wrinkled shirt that used to scream authority and now barely whispered employed. His ID badge was missing a stripe, a demotion, a visible one. He looked at me. I looked right through him. "Olivia," he said, voice low. I tilted my head. "Brad." A beat of silence passed like a virus on mute. "I didn't know." "You didn't read," I corrected. "That was the problem." He opened his mouth again, maybe to apologize, or maybe to spew more beige corporate noise. I was already walking. What I didn't tell him, what no one at Nerveware knew yet, was that 37 minutes before I arrived that morning, I signed a full-time contract with ArcTitan, their biggest competitor. Double the pay. Equity. Full technical autonomy. They handed me the keys to a clean server room and said, "Build us the future." I was already 2 weeks into sketching their backend, bigger, better, bulletproof, with full ownership. No rentals this time. So no, I didn't burn the bridge. I bought the land around it, rerouted the river, and let the bridge rot. As the elevator closed behind me, I pulled up my phone and checked the onboarding Slack from ArcTitan. A developer had pinged, "Hey Olivia, just curious, what's our license structure going to look like?" I typed back, "Mine. Send." Thanks for joining the fun, you office survivors. Subscribe for more switch flicking drama.